Listen carefully, for what you watched in the United States' complete and utter massacre of the New Zealand national team was not your typical international basketball game. It was a highly organized, ruthlessly efficient, and incredibly violent corporate liquidation carried out on a live global broadcast. We are discussing a final score of 101-46. I need you to consider that mathematical reality for a moment. A 55-point margin of victory is a very unusual sporting result. It is a dangerous geopolitical message sent straight to the rest of the international community, particularly the extremely political internal hierarchy of women's professional basketball. The conventional sports media, with their overly sanitized sponsor-friendly narratives, will kindly describe this as a dominate performance or a wonderful team effort. But the true operators, those who really grasp the dark, ruthless, uncompromising mechanics of leverage, global market share, and institutional power dynamics, perceive this event for what it is: a hostile takeover of the highest possible kind. It was not a competition. It was a display of market dominance on a magnitude we had never seen in this sport. For months, the firmly entrenched gatekeepers of Team USA and the WNBA environment have been engaging in a risky, highly politicized, and ultimately unsuccessful game of delay and denial. They have been urgently trying to shield the heritage hierarchy and the old guard from the new generation's undeniable, overwhelming, and completely disastrous gravitational pull. They've used every institutional trick in the book to keep the universe's brightest star running in a limited, closely supervised capacity. However, the dam has finally and catastrophically failed. The elite could no longer excuse their clear institutional misconduct, and they were eventually compelled to hand over complete control of the global franchise to the single most valuable athletic and commercial asset on the planet.
Zealand finally in the starting lineup. It took long enough. It took long enough. Stephanie White, I know your skin was crawling when you saw her in the starting lineup. I know you didn't like that. Caitlin Clark led Team USA to a more than...
When Caitlin Clark's name was officially written on the starting lineup card, the entire economic, psychological, and tactical reality of international basketball transformed forever and irreversibly. Do you have the ability to comprehend the sheer, terrifying magnitude of what happens when you surround a generational disruptor, a player who has already completely rewired the entire sports television viewership algorithms and corporate sponsorship models, with the most lethal collection of high-efficiency athletic assassins on the planet? You obtain a theoretically impossible 101-point offensive avalanche that makes the opposing federation doubt the foundation of their entire finance mechanism. Caitlin Clark walked onto the hardwood floor and immediately acted like a cruel, cold-blooded CEO, forcefully taking over a stagnating, failing Fortune 500 corporation. She played 23 extremely optimized minutes, absolutely controlling the spatial geometry of the entire court. She scored 14 incredibly efficient points and dished 6 absolutely devastating precise assists, completely dismantling the opposing defense. However, the bare basic box score data does not begin to capture the entire horrifying story of the power she possessed during those 23 minutes. She did not simply score points. She relentlessly and deliberately undermined the psychological will of the whole New Zealand defensive unit. She bent their whole defensive strategy and scouting report to her enormous gravitational pull, producing massive, untapped, very profitable pockets of space for her teammates to operate in with complete impunity. Let's talk about the terrible corporate merger that occurred in the United States backcourt. The on-court chemistry between Caitlin Clark and Paige Bueckers is more than just exciting basketball. It is a monopoly company meant to bankrupt the rest of the world and permanently remove all prospect of competitive equity. Paige Buecker recorded a team-high 24 minutes of utter operational brilliance, flawlessly combining her superior supercompute processing speed with Clark's energetic, unfettered vision. When those two intelligent, hyper-processing basketball minds are on the same floor at the same time, the athletic competition is no longer fair and balanced. It is a thoroughly manipulated marketplace. They are actively feeding people, producing tremendous, unparalleled returns on investment for the national program, and making the very complex sport of basketball appear stupidly, horrifyingly simple. Booker's 7 points, 3 rebounds, and 3 assists are merely administrative footnotes to a performance in which she essentially served as Clark's chief operating officer, ensuring that every offensive transaction was carried out with no wasted kinetic energy. But the utter unquestionable greatness of this exact 55-point massacre comes in the stark, obvious, and unsettling contrast between the unstoppable high-speed future and the fast, withering, wasteful past.
Group, they absolutely, like, that second group went off. I'm not even gonna lie to y'all. Chelsea Gray still starting. I don't know why. Chelsea Gray does not need to be a starter. It is what it is, man. Chelsea Gray.
The entrenched hierarchy is afraid of what Caitlin Clark represents, since her indisputable mathematical efficiency brutally and publicly exposes the old guard's physical obsolescence. We need to have a brutally honest and painful talk right now about the concept of seniority in elite professional sports. Seniority is a poisonous, wasteful corporate statistic created to safeguard legacy employees who can no longer quantitatively demonstrate their large market value through raw, incontrovertible physical output. Chelsea Gray has previously been a talented and well-respected operator. A true conventional point guard with an impressive and irrefutable record of victories and awards. However, the present highly developed game of basketball, driven by the unrelenting hyperkinetic pace that Caitlin Clark has forced on the sport, is completely unforgiving of players who lose lateral mobility and burst speed. The transaction has just become too quick for legacy hardware to handle adequately. Continuing to start players based on their prior accomplishments rather than their current objective kinetic reality is a surefire prescription for disaster in high-stakes geopolitical scenarios. The visual contrast on the floor was completely dazzling to anyone paying attention. When Clark is in charge, the basketball moves like a high-frequency trading computer on Wall Street, detecting defensive inefficiencies and viciously exploiting them in fractions of a millisecond. When the traditional guards remain on the floor, the entire operational system becomes bogged down in slow, predictable, easily defendable isolation sets that produce little advantage. The worldwide market has officially moved forward. The paradigm has drastically transformed, and the establishment must urgently accept that the new board of directors has formally taken its seats at the top of the table. And if you thought Caitlin Clark was just dangerous while she was throwing 30-foot logo bombs from the parking lot, you have completely missed the horrifying, extremely orchestrated off-season development. She has been quietly and aggressively executing while the rest of the league is recording podcasts. She hasn't merely relied on her lucrative endorsement deals. She has aggressively expanded her offensive product line in an effort to dominate every square inch of the half court.
She do it all. She literally, Caitlin Clark has added to her bag. I don't know if y'all know, Caitlin Clark has added to her bag. It's about to get spooky. It's about to get so spooky for these WNBA teams.
She has officially added a lethal, highly efficient, and biomechanically flawless mid-range game to her already extensive offensive repertoire. She's mercilessly snaking the pick and roll, brutally stopping on a dime with horrifying deceleration, and executing immaculate, unblockable mid-range pull-ups that completely and irreversibly short-circuit the opponent's defensive drop coverage. This is a disastrous, nightmare-inducing scenario for any defensive coordinator now working in the WNBA. When a player who commands utter frantic defensive focus at 35 feet suddenly demonstrates her ability to surgically and deliberately destroy your defense from 15 feet, she moves from superstar to mathematically unguardable status. She has effectively and permanently destroyed the last desperate, highly theoretical defensive approach that teams employ to try to contain her raw output. For the remainder of the league, things are about to turn very eerie and gloomy. Because this is more than just winning regular season games. This is primarily about the future collective bargaining agreement negotiations. The players are currently engaged in a violent battle for a big, unprecedented share of global television broadcasting income. And Caitlin Clark is the irrefutable billion-dollar battering ram who will forcefully smash through the massive oak doors of the billionaire owners' boardrooms. When she signs her next professional contract, the financial landscape of women's sports will be forever altered. And she is using these high-profile international games to demonstrate her total, undeniable commercial value in real time and in front of a large audience. She is demonstrating to the global corporations and television networks that she is the only owner of the viewership economy. Every time she draws up from the dribble, she is actively negotiating her next nine-figure contract in real time. However, the complete destruction of New Zealand was far from a one-woman show. It was a complete top-to-bottom, horrifying institutional flexing of sheer athletic muscle that sent shockwaves through the global basketball community. Let us go into great depth regarding the second unit, the bench mob. The absolute liquidation squad entered the game and poured highly flammable, literal gasoline on a raging fire. When an opponent team is already bleeding from the starting lineup surgical, high-speed hits, the last thing they want to see is Ryan Howard walk onto the court with pure cold-blooded psychotic malice in her eyes. Howard did not simply play a good game. She carried out a faultless, high-volume, extremely efficient shooting clinic that bordered on pure cruelty and international sabotage. She scored a team-high 18 points, shooting the absolute synthetic leather cover off the basketball. She was working as a highly skilled sniper with no conscience, punishing any minuscule rotational error made by the exhausted New Zealand defense. 6 of 10 from beyond the three-point line. That's 60% efficiency from deep volume. This isn't simply excellent shooting. This is a systematic breakdown of the opponent's psychological resolve. You cannot teach that amount of sheer, unadulterated anger. And operating alongside that perimeter artillery is Angel Ree's persistent, brutal, scary bodily interior presence. Ree spent 17 extremely productive, violently physical minutes pushing her will on the painted surface. She scored 9 points, got 4 keyboards, secured extremely valuable extra offensive possessions, and physically and methodically broke down the opposing frontcourt until they simply surrendered the paint and accepted their fate. When you combine it with Monique Billings' 5 for 7 shooting for 10 points and 6 rebounds and Kiki Irifin's 66% from the field for 9 points and 8 rebounds, you're looking at the very definition of a worldwide corporate monopoly. This is what an unsellable market share looks like in physical athletics. Team USA did not simply beat New Zealand. Quarter by quarter, they mathematically denied them the fundamental right to exist on the same competitive plane. Holding a worldwide professionally financed squad to just 46 total points over 4 quarters of regulation basketball is a defensive masterpiece based purely on raw physical intimidation, overwhelming athletic supremacy, and perfect defensive geometry. It is a psychological torture mechanism designed to make the opposition roster wonder why they even bothered flying to the arena. It is the sports equivalent of completely starving a competitor out of the market by cutting off their supply lines, destroying their crops, and salting the ground so that nothing can grow there again. And it all inevitably leads back to the fundamental catalyst, the main engine and the undeniable leverage point of this entire worldwide enterprise. Forget about internal federation politics. Forget the carefully prepared focus group tested PR comments issued by executives who are frightened of losing their jobs. Forget the legacy veterans' exceedingly fragile, shattered egos as they witness their market share, sneaker deals, and cultural importance evaporate before their very eyes.
Passes are going to be there. You know what I'm saying? This is why they need to start her. Forget all that seniority stuff and all that. This is the best point guard in the world. Why are we starting anybody else? It doesn't even make sense. Look at his pass.
Caitlin Clark is the best and most impactful point guard in the world right now. And the ongoing institutional failure to openly embrace objective, mathematically established reality is nothing more than pathological institutional delusion. She actively leads the team, fluidly dispersing offensive wealth and keeping the entire extremely talented squad ecstatic by giving precision, perfectly timed transition dimes that result in high-percentage highlight reel finishes. When you have a historically powerful asset, one that completely alters the financial, structural, and competitive reality of the sport, you do not put a restrictor plate on the engine just to make the older obsolete models feel a little better about their rapidly declining status. You release the brakes completely. You rip the establishment's steering wheel away from them. You grant her unrestricted access to the global franchise. And you let her to utterly, aggressively, and thoroughly destroy the competition without pity or hesitation. The New Zealand game was not a basketball match. It was an official, well-documented warning shot thrown over the bow of every basketball federation on the planet. The long-awaited transfer of power is no longer a theoretical discussion on sports talk radio. It's a terrible, irrefutable, and extremely evident dynamic reality. The rest of the world, and more crucially, the rest of the WNBA clubs, have been officially put on notice by the new administration. The courteous, foundational grow-the-game era of women's professional basketball is long gone and buried deep beneath the desert sand. We have officially entered the era of ruthless, hostile takeovers. This is the era of hyper-optimized efficiency, the age of big television ratings, global corporate sponsorships, and undeniable, merciless kinetic production dictates the exact terms of participation. Caitlin Clark has effectively and skillfully weaponized her entire game, erased her apparent physiological defects, and surrounded herself with elite, extremely talented corporate partners such as Paige Buchers, Ryan Howard, and Angel Reese. She is vying for every single broadcast dollar, championship trophy, and ounce of institutional leverage possible in the global sports market. The 101-46 devastation of New Zealand was not a statistical outlier. It marked the establishment of a terrible new baseline. It was the absolute minimal standard of execution for a national team that has finally realized its actual frightening potential under the visionary guidance of a generational disruptor. The old guard of the sport has only two options remaining. They can either gracefully stand aside, collect their legacy pensions, and watch the revolution unfold from the comfort of their luxurious suites, or they can stubbornly step onto the court and be completely, violently, and publicly ran over by the relentless bullet train of incontrovertible progress. There is literally no middle ground left. There is no room for polite compromises, shared equity, or participation awards. There is only the harsh, magnificent, and terribly merciless reality of elite, high-stakes sports economics. Caitlin Clark is currently the undisputed majority owner of the entire world board. The new professional season is soon approaching. The Most Valuable Player campaign has officially and actively launched, and the entire unmitigated carnage that is about to unfold over the next decade will be methodically studied in Ivy League business schools for the next 50 years as the ultimate faultless blueprint for a hostile market takeover. Welcome to the horrifying new world order of professional basketball. Welcome to the uncompromising era of total leverage. Do not blink. Do not look away for a single second, since the hostile takeover is only beginning, and the weak will be permanently exterminated and left in the dust.